Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut erat in principio, et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Thank you for making some
You're
time.
very welcome.
I know how difficult it is for any priest to find time in their
Thank
calendar.
you for you as a father of several young children to find that time as well.
That's true. That is true. Third guest I've had on this podcast before the collar, Father Gary Knecht.
You did very well. Very good. Yeah. Very few. Nobody in my parish calls me that. Everybody says K13 for short, or just actually just Father Gary.
One thing I've noticed interviewing the few priests I have, it's a unique story every time.
Sure.
And it's a very interesting to hear the calling you've had and to understand how you discerned it, and just the story of how you became a priest. So I have a list of questions here.
Sure,
I'm gonna lead with, but it will definitely I think draw that story out, and hopefully there's some young men out there who are discerning or contemplating in some way, and this will.
Yeah, and if I can be of any encouragement in my own way of saying yes to the Lord, and certainly my ways I've resisted His call at times.
Yeah,
I just that encouragement to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started. When did you first feel drawn to the priesthood?
I was about probably 7 or 8 years old when I first felt the first nudge to the priesthood. So my family's a little unique insofar as I'm from a part of our state, a little German town called Fowler, where most everybody's Catholic, at least in name,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the culture is very strong, families are very strong, and I have an uncle who's a priest and several great uncles who are also priests, and so I was blessed to have just priests that came over to the house not infrequently. Mm-hmm. And we'd, especially when we were young, we'd follow them around like little ducklings as they'd be going about their business. And my uncles, especially my uncle, Father Bill, who's in his 80s now, retired, but again, been a faithful priest. He especially, we got very close to, because he come over to I grew up on a dairy farm.
Okay.
And so he come over to the dairy farm where he had grown up, actually. And so he came back to his roots kind of, and he'd be helping with chores, and he'd join us for meals. But at some point during his visit, he would always stop and pray something called the breviary. Mm-hmm. So as priests, we make a promise to kind of pray for the world and pray for our parishioners 5 times throughout the day, mm-hmm. rooted in the Psalms. And that book is called the breviary. And so when we were little kids, we always knew that Father Bill would at some point during his visit always stop, and he'd typically just go into a shed and grab a pail and just sit down and start praying. Mm. And our parents always said to us, all right, when your uncle's praying, like, give him space. Don't go yap at him, which we'd be very likely to do. Yeah. Like, let him pray, give him some quiet time. So I was 7 or 8 years old, and I can remember I was sitting on the steps of my house, and I was watching Father Bill off in the distance. Just had his book out, he's praying, and this thought just came into my mind. I can remember, again, very distinctly that moment. And the thought was this, Gary, if you want to go to heaven one day, you should be a priest. Mm. And how I received that, even as a young kid, was, Gary, perhaps the best way for me to stay close to God was the prayer and service of the priesthood. And so even as a 7 or 8 year old, like, I had that longing, like, I want to be close to God. And perhaps I think for me, priesthood is going to be the way. So that thought just kind of came in. Mm-hmm. And even at that moment, I remember as it settled in, thinking, like, this is probably going to be it. But as interesting as I remember I'd be praying before I went to bed at night, before I went to sleep. And I don't know where I got this from, like from a saint book or something. I don't know where it came from, but I'd pray before I went to sleep, and I'd always ask, I'd say, Jesus, help me to do your will. And if I ever forget to ask for it, do it anyway. And that was my caveat as a child, to say, I'm going to cover my bases. If I, forget or whatever. Like, God, you're gonna do what you need to do. Like, and I'm grateful I put that in there, because there are times that I stopped asking, and God kept calling.
Wow.
And yeah, so it would kind of wax and wane, go up and down, but the thought of the priesthood never really left me from that moment on. And as the story goes on, and I give this especially as an encouragement for young men who might be watching this, right? We all approach the priesthood with different gifts, different temperaments, different, right, personalities. And so for me, as a young kid, I was extraordinarily shy and introverted. And like, so I'd be like, I was the kid that never wanted to be in the limelight. Like, I never want to be in front of people. I could be helping in the back somewhere, I could be whatever, but I don't want to be the one in front. And so God has a very good sense of humor. And he's like, you're going to be out there and remember, so even going into seminary, that fear was not a small part of the journey. That was probably one of the greatest blocks, actually. I mean, the desire for a family and the sense of, God, are you going to call me to give that up for you, right, was there. But it actually was the fear that was the greater part. Like, Lord, I don't know how I can be in front of people. I don't know how I can be happily giving homilies, giving people advice. I just really couldn't see that happening.
Yeah.
And
what was there a point in here where there was like some defining moment that you had that early calling that you knew, like, I know I'm doing this. I know I'm on the right path right now.
Yeah. One of the moments that was helpful for that, and I was kind of, like any story kind of jumps around. So, right, 7, 8 years old, felt the call. And now I have a twin brother who's also a priest, which is a little unique to the story. Exactly. We'll get there. So people often ask, like, did you and your brother ever tell each other you're thinking about the priesthood? And actually, we never did. We never said a word to each other. And so when we approached high school, I can remember actually doing, back in my day, they call it the plan test, like fill in the bubbles what you want to be one day. And so clergy was one of the things I filled in. I couldn't get out of my mind.
They actually had that on there.
They did.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was trying to be honest.
Yeah.
But at some point, my parents, they sat. Now I'm number 5 out of 10 children, so I'm from a fairly large family. But my parents are just good Catholic folks, right? They sat each of us kids down when we got into our usually freshman, sophomore year of high school, and said, "Have you ever considered that God might be calling you, right, to the priesthood for us boys, to religious vocation for my sisters?" And just saying, you should think about that. If you think God's calling you, right, that's we want to support you in that. Which is when I discovered that my twin brother also was thinking about the exact same thing. Again, we never said a word to each other. So that was the moment where I think it became very clear, probably around freshman or sophomore, junior year of high school, that I was going to be going to seminary.
Okay.
We began meeting with our local pastor, the vocation director, and it began like, all right, I think I'm gonna give it a go.
Wow.
And that's kind of how it all. Right, that was a pretty definitive moment on the journey for sure.
So after you made that, you discerned that you're going to go into the seminary. How did your family and your friends react?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I think they're very, I guess, all very supportive. All very supportive. There's some surprise. I mean, like that's just not what people often talk about. Now, that being said, what also makes my hometown unique is that there's been a long history of priests in my home parish. So when I was ordained, I was the 22nd priest ordained out of the parish. And so every 8-10 years, they always had somebody becoming a priest. And so it was much more in front of our eyes, I think, than an average town or average parish would be. But that being said, it was still a surprise to some people. But once they knew that, they were always very supportive. Parents can sometimes get interesting questions from other people because it's a mysterious thing at times. And so mom and dad, I know, had to field a couple interesting questions about what we were going to be doing. But no, they were always very. People just wanted us to do God's will, and at the very least, like, we want you to be happy, and that's going to make you happy. Go for it. At least that's just like the world view on things, right?
Yeah. So you have a very, like you said, a very unique situation where you have a twin brother who is also became a priest.
At the exact same time,
same
yeah.
time, everything. But then there's further to that story as well.
That's correct. With the youngest in the family, my brother, now father Randy, was ordained a priest this summer.
Yeah. So your situation's much different than at least the other priests that I've interviewed in the past, because for them it may have not been a necessarily a surprise or anything, but it's more, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have a lot more support in your family. With one, you had an uncle who was a priest, and then two, you have three priests, and your parents have three priests in their family. That's just unbelievable.
Which means I'm actually, quite frankly, very spoiled. That because my twin and I have always been very close, and we've shared priesthood now for 11 years together, and we routinely have the same day off, and so we spend a lot of time together on that, and we can just talk about priestly life and questions we've got going, homily tips, things we've been. So to have that kind of foundation is huge, and then a big family. I can't tell you what a blessing that is, where anybody can get isolated, right? And certainly for a priest living a celibate vocation, if he doesn't have good family and friends around him, that can happen all the more easily. And so, as I said, I know that I'm spoiled, right? That I've got my family on the farm, numerous siblings that are around, so I can hop around and see just about anybody I want when I want, and that and what a gift and what a blessing that is.
Yeah, awesome. So getting into a little deeper question, was there ever any struggle with doubt, or did you question during your discernment?
Yeah, there are definitely. I mean, those first few years, for sure. That's kind of, that question's always in the first few years of seminary, especially. That question's always in the back of. I know it certainly was in my mind, the discernment question: am I supposed to be a priest or not? And learning to grow through, it's like a roller coaster, and some days are easier, some days are harder, and we can sometimes equate to the days that are harder means I shouldn't be a priest, and the days that are better means I should be a priest. Maybe not. And thankfully, you're not journeying alone in that. You meet with a priest every 2 weeks called the spiritual director to help you kind of pick out God's voice from everything else going on. And so in the midst of that, the doubt would mostly be around, I'd say, probably the fear of the public speaking, the homilies, just the insecurity that was at play in that. And but as I went through seminary, became the no never came, I guess. And so I began just asking very fervently, Lord, I think I'm going to be a priest one day, which means you better help me. You better help with giving these homilies, with being in front of people. And somehow in that time, he allowed that transformation to begin to happen, such that now it's something that I very much love, and can't imagine not being in people's lives to help them in the ways that a priest can do. So I'm so grateful that God's voice won out in the end over my own voice, and certainly the enemy in there chirping away, trying to.
For you, what was the most difficult part of the seminary? If there was a difficult part. I think the most difficult and the best part of seminary was learning how to pray. I think, actually. I grew up in, again, a beautiful Catholic family home. We went to Mass every week. We would actually pray in the home several times. But I didn't necessarily have a well-established personal prayer life before going to seminary. I wasn't spending 20, 30 minutes a day in prayer typically. Well, I was praying the rosary. I had begun doing that as I got closer to seminary, but it wasn't I'm going to spend this time with you, God. That was not a well-established part of my life. And seminary, that's a big part of your life. And so at least the college seminary that I attended, we began every morning with a holy hour at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's very early. I was not used to that adjustment. But also, what do I do for an hour? What do I do for an hour? And of course, recognizing, not knowing at that point, the friendship that
prayer is meant to be, and learning to pick out God's voice. And I remember after that first year, that first semester, got back for Christmas break, and we had a longer J term, as they called it. So I was off from before Christmas until almost the end of January, which was very unique. Most of all my high school friends had gone back to college earlier, so just a big chunk of time. And I can say in that first big break, right, without the structure of the seminary, like I just fell off the prayer bandwagon. Like I still going to Sunday Mass, like those things were in place, but I wasn't doing the daily prayer that I had been doing. And God uses everything. Thank you, Jesus, for that. God uses everything. And so how he used that was he opened my eyes to, I got to the end of that break, got back to the seminary, and recognized like something was missing. Yeah. Like there was I actually was hungry for that time. And to be able to name that was, again, extraordinarily helpful. And then, again, continuing to grow in prayer, learning to trust God. It's so easy in prayer to think, I'm just making this stuff up. Yeah. This is just this is me just talking to myself. And in so doing, we can hold God at a distance, not receiving the very things that he wants to give. And so the most life-changing moment for me in the seminary process came in the 5th year. At the end of the 5th year, we were blessed to do something called the Ordination exercises, which is a 30-day silent retreat. Oh, yeah. It's 10 days of silence, break day, 10 days of silence, break day, 10 days of silence. And you're meeting with the director every day, and you have guided meditations, but you're praying 4 to 5 hours a day. And I remember going into that, like that was the time that really taught me what prayer was, and really taught me how close God wants to be. And he had to work very hard to convince me, like, Gary, I want to be with you. I want to bless you. Like, I want to be involved when you get for breakfast in the morning, when you go for a run in the afternoon. I want to be, like, tell me all about it, please. And in that 30 days, like, he really did wear me down is not the right answer. It was, I think, convince me that. And so he just revealed himself in a way that I had never experienced before. The power of that time is that you're in such silence that he's going to talk about what needs to be talked about, including the hard stuff. So it was one of the most beautiful and difficult things that ever happened in my life, but it was so life-changing. And so back to your original question, prayer has been the most difficult and the best part of seminary.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. So you mentioned your Uncle Bill.
Yep, Uncle Father Bill
was a priest, or is a retired priest. Was there any other like spiritual mentors that you had
during the growing up years primarily, or
just throughout this process?
Sure.
People that kind of helped you guide you through this journey.
I have to really give again kudos to my parents for sure. Right, they. As I keep saying, what they did wasn't fancy. They just lived a good Catholic life. And, they running a farm, raising 10 kids, like we got to witness like all the work that entails and the very real sacrifice that entails, but also the happiness and joy they had in us and in each other. And so that witness was very critical. The fact that we prayed in the home, that taught us, right, that God is real. Right? In those kind of weekday prayer times, and again, I'm so grateful to my parents. They've shared with us since that they kind of had to make that up as they went. They didn't have an example of how to do it, but they just knew they had to do something, and so they just began. So we'd usually read some scripture, pray a deck of the Rosary. We do a round of Thanksgiving and a round of something to pray for. And I mean, as you can imagine, getting 10 young kids into a living room like this, chaotic. I mean, there'd be somebody crying in the corner, somebody fighting over the rosary color, and
it's hard enough with 6. So
yeah, exactly, right, exactly. But and then we'd be praying for things such as praying for a snow day to get out of school, or but we'd also be praying for things like praying for the rain, and then it would rain, and like what that taught us as kids, like because as a farmer, like you live and you die by the rain.
Yeah.
and to show that he is faithful. Like, we asked for something and that happened. And so, again, very grateful for my parents just witnessing to us that God was real to them, that he was doing real things in their lives. So, like, that foundation is such a gift. And then we had some great priests in my home parish, right? That made it, Todd and I, my brother and I, we served a lot, right? So them welcoming us in, and especially knowing, right, encouraging us to consider the priesthood. And once we were really kind of in line to enter the seminary, and certainly even after entering seminary, like coming back on breaks and like being involved in the parish, like that is such a gift, because it helps to show you what you're kind of striving for and going to be saying yes to one day. And so being welcomed by any number of priests into parishes over the years, very, very helpful to be able to just to be that example, and just to open our eyes again. What does it entail? Yeah. So very.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's, I have a larger family. I can't say large when 10 is large for you. So having 6 kids and bringing priests and seminarians into our household, it's like makes me. I think of like what's the future look like? Yeah. With 3 boys in my family, but yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. And I one of the joys of being, I've been a pastor now of a parish for the last 5 years, and we've had seminarians over the summer or even during the year, really for the last 4 years. And I can't tell you what a blessing that has been for me personally to have them around, but also just for the parish, for that example. Yeah. And it's such a gift. I love being able to, knowing how much I received from other parishes and other priests that were willing to take the time to say, if I can give back in a little way, this is a great way to do so.
Yeah. All right. Well, next question I got for you. Is there, I know I asked you about like a defining moment during your journey, but is there like some moment during like your time in seminary that kind of changed your perspective of what you thought it was versus what it actually was?
That's a good,
making you think.
Yeah, no, there's a very specific example I'm going to share. But going back to spending time in parishes was very critical for that. But there was a moment I was going to be ordained a deacon. Mm-hmm. So pretty far into the process, right? That's when you make all your commitments. Like, this is what I'm going to be doing. I remember thinking to myself, and like, what does it mean to be a deacon? Like, the seminary gave us a theological answer that to be a deacon is to be ordained to Christ's servant. I'm like, that sounds a little abstract to me. Like, Jesus, what does that mean? And I remember one morning of the seminary, I prayed. I said, Lord, could you just show me like what it means to be your servant? I'm going to be a deacon soon. I probably should know what I'm going to be saying yes to here. So I remember I prayed that in the morning, and then I kind of just forgot about it. But I was in Detroit at the seminary, and the way the seminary is set up there, Sacred Heart is its name, is that it sits on about 2 city blocks with a kind of a wrought iron fence that goes all the way around it. And so I would usually every day go out and just kind of walk around on the sidewalk praying a rosary. So I had made that prayer early in the morning, like, hey, Jesus, could you just show me what it means to be your servant? I remember I walked out of the gates to get on the sidewalk, and there's a man coming down the road, or the sidewalk. And so we met and just began walking and talking. And we got to the end of the block where he's going to keep going. I'm going to make the turn. And so we're just chit-chatting. I said, hey, nice meeting you. What's your name? And this guy said to me, well, my name's Gary. I'm like, cool. I don't meet many Garys. There's not many of us in the world. So I said, my name's Gary as well. What's your last name? And he said, my last name is Gary King. Now that moment was like a 2x4 to the head, because my last name, that hard German name of Kenigsnicht, means king's servant. And so all I could at least interiorly say back to him was, well, your name is Gary King. My name is Gary King's servant. Mm-hmm. And it settled in so clearly to me at that moment of Jesus saying, what it means to love is, can you love the person in front of you? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, that was a big change.
Wow.
That was a big change.
Got the chills here and that.
Yeah. And it's like in any parish, for example, you'll have hundreds of people, but you meet them usually one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And God has ways of interrupting your day. The phone call, you're at the hospital seeing somebody else comes in, you're at the store, somebody wants to talk. Can I love the person in front of me?
Wow. Yeah.
And some days I'm better at it than others, I'll say that. But that was a really key moment for me that really helped bring that home.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know why when you were saying his last name was King, I'm like, wait, this is.
It did. Yeah.
Your name. It makes sense. But yeah, that's a good one. So I asked this question, and I always ask it wrong. But so you discerned, you went through seminary, you became a priest. What was your first experience leading the Mass for you like?
Well, it was an interesting combination of like wonder, like I get to do this, and also I don't want to screw this up. So interesting combination of both those things put together. I can say this: it's much easier to pray the Mass now than that first time. I think it was just mostly. Well, I was very happy. I can say I was very, very happy, but it was very focused on like, let's get the key parts here.
Yeah, and if I understand the process, usually you guys on like a Saturday, at least I've been to the last couple. You were ordained,
yeah,
and then normally the Sunday you say a Mass with your family, right?
Correct. Usually, exactly. Usually you do it on the next day. You do you have a party that evening.
Yep.
And then you'll do a Mass of Thanksgiving, as they call it, in your home parish, followed by some more partying, typically.
So in your case, you and your brother were ordained together. How did you guys handle that?
So what we did is we handled it where, and this time I'm actually forgetting if it happened Saturday night. I cannot remember, to be honest, anymore. So what happened was my brother, Father Todd, he celebrated the first Mass of Thanksgiving, and I sat in what I called choir, meaning I wanted to have my own Mass of Thanksgiving be my first, which felt very strange. Yeah. Kind of being there in the wings waiting, but then the next day when I did my Mass of Thanksgiving, he came along and he was able to celebrate. So yeah.
I was wondering how they would have. Yeah. So this is a rare occasion when not only brothers are priests but twins who are ordained on the same day. It's probably a once in a lifetime type thing.
It's one of the cool things about God, like he has such a clear way to message us that he sees us and he knows us. And so my brother, Father Todd, and I were ordained on June 14th, 2014, which made it happen such that our Mass of Thanksgiving ended up being our home parish, which is Most Holy Trinity, the feast day of the Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. So we were able to celebrate our first Mass on our parish's feast day.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Now, fast forward 11 years, my brother, Father Randy, happened to also be ordained on June 14th. And same thing. His first Mass is on
That's cool.
Holy Trinity. So God just kind of lining all that up has been.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had known that he had, at least this year, when he was ordained, that it was on the Feast of Holy Trinity. I did not know that yours was.
But the odds of having all three of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I got a few more questions for you.
No, that's what we're doing well.
We got some time.
We're doing well.
How has your understanding of your faith evolved since your childhood?
Yeah. Well, how it has changed is, and this is what I was getting at before, the best and the hardest part of seminary was prayer, was recognizing how close Jesus really is, how good he really is, how he wants to be involved in every part of my life. That's been, obviously, like I had that moment when I was 7 or 8, so obviously he was there, he was speaking, but I've grown to trust him in a very different way now. And to recognize his mercy. And as a priest, to see we are on the front lines in people's lives, to see him come over and over and over and over and over again. And so that part has really blossomed change, to come alive in a very different way.
That's awesome. What's the biggest misconception people have about becoming a priest?
You know, it's what's interesting. I think it actually has to do with most people associate, right? People, one of the biggest things people say about priests, well, you can't get married, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
And you get some pretty funny questions from people in stores and things like, do you know you can't be married? I didn't know that.
Thank you for reminding me.
But people will say, oh, you've sacrificed so much.
Mm-hmm.
You've given so much, when like I got the jackpot. Like I get to be so it's the misconception is people only see that you're giving up something and they don't know what you're getting, right? And that's, I think, perhaps the greatest misconception there.
Yeah, I guess, I never really thought of it that way. That there's a whole nother side of it that you're getting that someone who is married is not getting, and to think of it in that.
Yeah, so it's
I'm sure you've heard that a few times.
Yeah, and people usually mean very well, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
but it's to recognize, like, being a priest is a gift unto itself.
Yeah,
and that gift is only, yes, it's been so beautiful. I mean, 11 years in now, thinking, Lord, I feel like I'm only just beginning to learn what it means to be a priest, and that's not to lessen the 10 years before, but it gets deeper and it gets better and it gets richer. And Lord willing, like any marriage does the same.
Yeah, wow. What is some advice you would give to someone discerning?
I would recommend, make sure we're praying. Talk to God. Give permission to say, Lord, I am open to what you want. And I would also really recommend, as they're thinking about discernment, yes, they got to be thinking about the priesthood, but the better question is God calling me to the seminary? Because that's the place where I'm going to figure out if I'm going to be a priest or not. But we get caught up in the end game, and so it can feel strange actually putting the priesthood proper on the back burner. But rather it's, can I commit myself to the place and the process by which the Lord will make that very clear? And so we can be afraid to take that step, thinking if I do this, then it means I'm going to have to be a priest. No, not at all. Right? Seminary is the place you go if you do think that God might be calling and you want clarity. So it can feel very strange to think that stop thinking about the priesthood. Keep thinking about the priesthood, but leave it in God's hands. Like, He will make it clear in His time.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, interviewing Father Anthony, he had mentioned there were people he went to the seminary with, and they ended up at some point not becoming a priest, and now they're a large family.
Correct. And I've gotten some of my best friends are in that exact situation.
So. I think there was actually an article in one of the faith magazines not too long ago.
Yes, both guys were in my class actually. Okay. Father, Nick George and Jonathan Smith.
Yeah.
So, two good men now. Two good husbands and fathers.
Yeah, and that's like another like misconception as well, is that going to the seminary means you're becoming a priest. It's not always the case.
No, yes. I mean, and the seminaries, they're designed so well to say, we want you to do God's will, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so even like the college seminary, I came in out of high school, and so that seminary, St. John Vianney, Minnesota, does such a great job of saying, we want you to be good men who are going to be a good father or a good priest, however God's calling.
Yeah.
And for guys that come in out of high school, they say the average rate, if you come in, you have about 30% go on to be priests, which means 2/3 go on into the world to be husbands and fathers and doing God's work.
Wow,
there.
I didn't know it was only around 30%.
Yeah, usually if you go in a little later after college, it gets a little, more, maybe about 50-ish% or more become priests. But
it makes sense because not everybody who goes to college out of high school actually graduates either. So
that's also true too. Yeah, some of my best friends are are guys that I began with, and again, God called them out, and that's beautiful too.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Last question I have. I think it's a fun one, but it makes you think a little bit. What is your someone who's studied the Bible? What's your go-to verse?
It seems like that changes per season. When I was in seminary, one of my go-to verses was, "Lord, I do believe, help my unbelief." Kind of speaking into some of those insecurities. Right now, I'd say I gravitate probably to Psalm 84, where it says, even the swallows find a nest, find a home by your altars, Lord, as they build their nests. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. And so that sense of, I will only be home. Any of us will only be home if we're building our life with God, in God. And so that's certainly one of my go-to Psalms.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's actually all I have for you.
Okay.
I want to thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Matt, for asking some great questions.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear the different stories, because a misconception that I had throughout all this, or before this, was thinking all priests you become a priest. There it is. And what I've learned is the stories are so unique, and each of you have your own little whisper that nobody really knows, and unless you tell the story. So
that's right, and that should give us such great confidence, right? That if God can approach us so uniquely, He does that for everyone.
Yeah,
we just want to be able to hear His voice.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you, Matt. God bless you.
Yeah. Same to you.